and this is the approach of the Switch to Circular Economy Value Chains project. My name is Holly Syret, and I'm the VP of Impact Programs and Sustainability at Global Fashion Agenda, and delighted to be the moderator for today. This is an official side session of the 2024 OECD Forum on Due Diligence in the Garment and Footwear Sector, and this session is hosted by UNIDO. So we have a diverse panel of participants that will all be partnering with UNIDO on their different projects. So during today's discussion, we'll be exploring the role of traceability in circular fashion value chains and also how that links to due diligence. And specifically, we'll be exploring case studies from solutions that are currently being piloted in Bangladesh. So that'll really be the case study that we're exploring. And within the Bangladesh work, they're focusing on post-industrial textile waste recycling. So within this context, it's traceability, support, and textile waste finding its best possible recycling solutions. Our objectives today and what we hope you'll take away from this conversation is really an understanding of the role of traceability to future-proof textile and garment industries like in Bangladesh, to understand how traceability supports due diligence and CSRD reporting and other types of reporting, but also for any of the companies that are dialing into this conversation today to leave with inspiration of the lessons that have been shared and have been learned to increase traceability in your value chain. And perhaps if they're policymakers on the call, to help create a conducive environment to enable traceability. And ultimately, of course, traceability is a means to an end. And we hope that the tool that traceability can be will help work towards a more sustainable and circular fashion industry. So on the agenda, we have a few welcome words from some honourable guest speakers. Then we'll dive into the panel with a diverse lineup of expert speakers who can really shine light on this topic from their different perspectives. And as Anna mentioned, we're hoping to save time for Q&A. So please use the chat function to ask your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them throughout. But now we'd like to hand over for the first opening remarks to Mr. Mark Drake, who is the Chief Technical Advisor at Switch to Circular Economy at UNIDO.
Thank you, Holly, for the introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, distinguished panelists and participants. I'm delighted to see such a big interest from around the world. I believe that shows that that there is interest and relevance and timeliness of this panel. Let me say a few words about the project that is hosting, so to speak, this event. Is the Switch to Circular Economy Value Chains project, which is a large initiative that is funded by the European Union and Finland, has been going on for 2 to 3 years and is roughly halfway. We as UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, are leading this project, and we have a lot of partners, including Chatham House, Circular Economy, European investment banks, as well as many others, also brands, knowledge partners, many of which are present in this panel. And the overall objective of this project is to facilitate, to support, and to trigger the shift to more circular approaches. And we aim to do that in 3 value chains: textile, plastic, and electronics. Now, today we will only talk about textile, and we will more specifically focus on Bangladesh, because that is the country of our operations. Logically so, I would say, knowing that Bangladesh is the 2nd largest exporter of garments. And what is also relevant, just a few numbers, as many of you know, around 85% of exports for Bangladesh relate to the textile sector. There are 4.2 million direct jobs and close a tenfold of that indirect jobs. So whatever happens in this sector is critical, is essential for the country, for the economy, for jobs, for people, and in that sense there are new trends. There are certain things changing, driven also by upcoming regulation from the EU, the Green Deal, the Circular Economy Action Plan, which we believe will come at a certain time and at a certain pace. And this is the regulatory side of it. But what we want to emphasize is the business opportunity that this shift to more circular approaches also presents. And that is why we work closely with the brands, with their suppliers, and their suppliers to see what can work and what can be scaled. And we have learned in the past period of our project that there are many challenges, of course, logically so, in terms of innovative recycling technologies, in terms of separation of materials, in terms of access to finance, in terms of capacities, in terms of how to properly include informal sector. And in a way, cross-cutting to all of this is then the traceability, of course, which is essential Holly has already explained it. I will not repeat it for the sake of time, but it is cross-cutting to show, to demonstrate to a variety of stakeholders what is happening in terms of materials and products. I'm about to conclude, and the final words I would like to say is that our role as UNIDO, our ambition in this project is to bring together the different stakeholders, because a shift to circularity can only happen in partnership. And in that sense, we're very, very proud and happy that we have important brands with us and their partners, and also, importantly, the government, because whatever might work from the technical level, from the business level, also needs to be facilitated, needs to be supported by enabling frameworks. And in that sense, we are glad and honored to have a strong partnership with the Ministry of Commerce in Bangladesh as our main partner in this project. There are also other ministries involved, Ministry of Youth and Textile, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, but especially Ministry of Commerce. And that is where I would like to conclude before giving the floor to the additional secretary for his opening remarks, and wish all of us and all of you a very fruitful discussion and panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. And then we would like to hand over to Mr. Mohammed Naveed Saifullah, the Additional Secretary at the Ministry of Commerce in Bangladesh. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. First of all, I'm extremely sorry for being a bit late because of a technical glitch which was happening. This is Mohammed Naveed Saifullah. I'm working as Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Commerce. I have recently joined here in the export wing. So should I proceed?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Esteemed participants, distinguished guests, organizers from UNIDO, and esteemed colleagues. I'm really honored, and it's my pleasure to join today's panel discussion on traceability in circular value chains in the textile industry as an initiative of switch to circular economy value chain. So Bangladesh's garment industry, as you are, most of you are aware, that is a cornerstone of our economy, which accounts for about 85% of our export income and employing over 4.2 million Bangladeshis directly, with an indirect impact on at least 40 million individuals. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Perfectly,
okay.
Yes.
However, challenges such as the lack of business case and limited local capacities for recycling solutions for textile waste pose environmental, health, and economic hazards. Despite these challenges, Bangladesh has made significant strides with over 200 USGBC LEED certified factories and a growing commitment to sustainability from major brands, with a trickle-down effect on the local partners and suppliers in Bangladesh. We'd be happy to know, I think you also know that Bangladesh is one of the top USGBC LEED certified. Bangladesh has got some of the topmost factories which is LEED certified. As we strive to become a middle income country by 2026, we must focus on market diversification, and our Honorable Prime Minister, she is also putting emphasis on this issue. Product development, technological advancement, and talent development as well. This initiative targets medium and small-sized firms and aligns with strong market demands for circular practices, especially from buyers like the EU. The switch to circular economy project will support our industries by enhancing competitiveness, promoting social responsibility, and fostering circularity among businesses. Our government is committed to creating an enabling environment for the circular transition. The Ministry of Commerce, in collaboration with the Ministry of Textile and Jute, the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change, the Ministry of Finance, and other relevant organizations will support the implementation of this project. We aim to improve policy frameworks, promote green circular jobs, and enhance innovation and knowledge dissemination. Ministry of Commerce of Bangladesh as the lead focal point for this project from the government, and myself is highly ambitious and optimistic for the project outcomes, and we are looking forward to enjoy the benefits for the circular economy transition by creating trade and social impacts for the country. Ministry of Commerce is also very positive to have a specific segment on circular economy in our upcoming export policy 2024. Through collaborative efforts, we can mobilize this transformation towards sustainable textile and RMG industries and a sustainable economy for Bangladesh by 2026. The Ministry of Commerce is eager to see concrete outcomes from this project and is committed to integrating circular economy principles into our export policy. We welcome all support and facilitation in this endeavor. Looking forward to new learnings from today's discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you all. This is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed Nabi Saifullah. It's a pleasure to have you, and I think hearing the concrete commitments of your ministry to incorporating circular economy principles are very promising for the organisers of today's event, but also the different initiatives. So thank you very much for being here. After these wonderful opening remarks. Oh,
I just want to interrupt. Since I have another meeting which is already going on here, I just joined for this meeting. So if you allow me and permit me, then I can leave this event at this pointed time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining.
We'll keep in touch in this regard in the coming days. Wish you all the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, so we will now continue on with our next segment, which will be the majority of the next hour and a bit, and that's the panel. So I'd like to invite all of our panelists, I think we have nearly all of them, to turn on their cameras and unmute. And I'll give you a short introduction, and perhaps I can invite you to give the audience a little wave, our virtual audience, when I introduce you, and then we'll dive straight into the questions so we can catch up on a little bit of time. So I'd like to start introducing Ms. Vidya Khan, who is the Deputy Managing Director at Desh Garments Limited, but also a Director at the BGMEA. Welcome, Vidya. Mr. Alexander Gramberg, who is the Sustainability Senior Project Specialist at BESTSELLER. Welcome, Alexander. Mr. Rial Kamrazaman, who's the Project Lead Sustainability Programme at H&M. Ms. Nin Castle, the co-founder and Chief Programme Officer at Reverse Resources. Mr. Samatish Banerjee, who is the Partner Business Consulting and Research at Intellecap. Ms. Camille Tahon, the Project Manager at Circular Economy Foundation. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Patrick Schroeder, who is the Senior Policy Analyst at Chatham House. Welcome, everyone. We'll dive straight in with the first questions. And I said last but not least for a reason, because I'd like to start with you, Patrick. We're talking about traceability, and we'd like to start by unpacking what the policy landscape looks like on traceability. And then throughout the conversation, we can funnel that down into the examples of what's being implemented in Bangladesh. So my question to you is, can you help us understand what the current policy situation is at a global level regarding traceability?
Yeah, thank you, Holly. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, to start off, maybe important to mention is traceability is key for material circularity. That's not only for the textile sector, but many other industries as well. However, at the moment, on the global level, there's very limited traceability across supply chains. So about 65% of procurement leaders across different sectors have very limited visibility beyond their tier 1 suppliers, and only about 6% of procurement leaders say they have full transparency of their entire supply chain. So this is not a very good situation to enable circularity and the business models that depend on traceability. Now, when it comes to policy, there's not one specific policy on traceability, but it's a whole range of policies, and they often require different types of information. So at this stage, most traceability related policies are related to forced labor or human rights issues. So one of these policies is the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act that by the US that came into force in 2022. There's others which are more related to products. An example here, and they're often value chain specific. An example is the EU deforestation-free regulation, and which is also relatively new. So most of these have only entered into force within the last 2 or 3 years, and some of them are still in the proposal stage. And I provide some more details on this a bit later. The other thing to look at is also how these policies apply to different companies, and they don't apply equally. Often in the first stages they apply to larger ones, and then smaller companies and suppliers then are phased in later on. Now, what's also important for circularity is that traceability upstream in the production stages is only one aspect, but we also need traceability downstream. For the textile sector, that means also post-consumer textile waste that's being generated. And as another principle, and that's where policies also need to be able to support, not only regulate in a jurisdiction, but also how do policies enable close collaboration across the value chain, across different jurisdictions, and also enable cooperation between governments. I'll just stop here for now.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, so it's not incredibly straightforward that there's one traceability policy that encompasses the whole value chain, but actually different policies that touch on traceability for different purposes. Thank you so much. And then perhaps over to Camille at Circular Economy Foundation, because you recently finalized a value chain assessment for the textiles and garments industry in Bangladesh. Can you share with us your most important conclusions from that and how that tied into traceability?
Yes, so indeed we just finished a textile value chain assessment in Bangladesh, really with the goal to provide an overview of the current state status, but also the circular economy developments in the sector, to orient local and international stakeholders looking to establish new initiatives on this topic. And by the way, we also have a visual on the slide. I don't know if it's possible to present it, because maybe it will help illustrate some of the insights. And in the context of circular economy, we primarily looked at traceability from the perspective of materials with recycled content specifically. So not only looking at the first life of material and products, but also tracing how the waste or byproducts are reintroduced back into the loop, as you can see on the visual and mentioned by Patrick. So this is especially important because many of the measures that currently exist to guarantee the safety and sustainability of first generation products, for example, many initiatives or policies that aim to limit the use of toxic chemicals in dyes, are not always fit for purpose when it comes to guaranteeing the safety and sustainability of second generation products. And our research also showed that in Bangladesh, the challenge is also amplified by the fact that most of the post-industrial waste that is used as feedstock to recycling processes is traded through informal networks. So it's generally harder to guarantee the traceability of recycled content, but also the lack of paper trail that generally accompanies informal networks makes it even more difficult. So the conclusion of this assessment was that robust traceability systems are necessary to foster a more responsible and resilient industry by, for instance, improving accountability through the supply chain, improving measurement and reporting of recycled content, but also ultimately enhance consumer trust in recycling products. Because if we are to wear recycled textiles, we would like to make sure that they also pass through all the safety, quality, and sustainability requirements we set on new textiles.
Thank you, Camille. And that's incredibly interesting to hear how there's also the consideration, of course, within circular systems for not only the first product and the traceability of that first product, but also how that then ties into its second life forms, being a recycled material or being something else. So perhaps then to go to one of our first brand speakers, Alexander, how can you share with us how BESTSELLER's working on improving traceability of these like post-industrial textile waste streams, and how perhaps you're working with your supply chain on these types of strategies?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Maybe it's good to know like why we are looking at post-industrial waste in Bangladesh in the first place. Because of course we are looking at ways of increasing the recycled content in our garments, and then looking at different waste streams, and then looking at post-industrial waste. It's pretty interesting because we have homogenic waste, big volumes available in our sourcing countries. And Bangladesh is a strategic sourcing country for us, where a lot of cotton-rich garments are being produced. So we have a lot of post-industrial waste suitable for recycling technologies, which is already scalable in the industry. So of course, in Bangladesh, and going back a little bit to what Camille said, what we also learned working with our manufacturers, we know that waste is maybe not always segregated. It's a non-transparent system. We don't know where the waste ends up. The waste have a destination today, but as I said, we don't really know what's happening with that waste, and maybe it's being burned, or it's ending up at on landfill, or it's being downcycled. So that's why we really would like to work with a system where we can enhance transparency, and we work with Reverse Resources, which is a platform provider where we work with our manufacturers. They can put in data on the platform, and we can trace the waste back to recyclers, which is enhancing the whole transparency, and we can ensure textile to textile recycling and then getting it back to our products. That's the main purpose here. When we started off this project, and of course we were met with some resistance from our manufacturers. Maybe they didn't really know why they should do this extra work of segregating or tracing the waste. But we actually saw that when we worked with some of the key manufacturers, they were actually able to increase the value of the waste when the waste was handled in the correct way. So that was a great incentive. We also saw that some of the manufacturers, they actually reached some of their own climate targets, which was also great. So overall in this project, we see that there is a common understanding from the manufacturer's side that if they handle the waste correctly, they will benefit. But also linking back to what Camille said, I think the bigger or the challenge now is, of course, how do we involve the larger supply chain? So also the waste handler into the system to make the system more transparent. I think that would be the next step.
Thank Thank you, Alexander. And so it's really quite pragmatic implementation work that you just described there as well. I'm curious to understand what this also indicates for Bestseller. Say Bangladesh is a strategic sourcing country. I mean, developing these types of systems, does that also relate into long-term commitments for Bestseller working in Bangladesh?
Yes, for sure. And as I said, some of our key partners and key manufacturers, they are based in Bangladesh, and it's really about having and creating this partnership with our manufacturers and doing this project with them, really strengthening this.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and especially, of course, with all the challenges that we're facing around the world and the fluctuations in prices, I think building those long-term commitments is at least something that we really advocate for at GFA. So yeah, you already also mentioned informal sector and the necessity of the digital or using digital tools. So that leads me to introduce our next speaker, and my question is for you, Nin. If you can share a little bit more about what tools Reverse Resources is developing to support this journey, and if you can talk a little bit more to any specific challenges you're facing in Bangladesh at the moment, or how you're trying to tackle them.
Thanks, Holly. Pleasure to be here. So Reverse Resources, we've built a SaaS platform to digitize, connect, and scale global textile-to-textile recycling. So how do we do this? Well, the platform brings together, and I've got a slide actually here, and if you could bring it up, that'd be fantastic. The platform brings together 4 different stakeholders: the brands, the manufacturers, the waste handlers, and the recyclers. And I think it's a key thing to say here, we've worked really hard in not building a reporting tool for just collecting trace data and providing the traceability. But in fact, we've been really striving to build a business case for why each stakeholder want to participate on the platform. So the ambition is to build useful tools that allow people to do their businesses better. And then the byproduct of those tools is the data and the traceability that could be shared outwardly to the other stakeholders. So how does it work? As Alexander mentioned, the first stage is working with the textile sector. We have a garment factory here, but it could be a spinning facility, it could be a mill, and it's working with those different manufacturers and how to set up really simple processes and how to segregate their waste by color and composition, and just simple changes in the bin systems have huge benefits further down the line for other stakeholders. And we've lost the screen for a moment. Thank you. The next stakeholder, so the manufacturers enter the waste data into the platform, so that makes the waste visible, and we can actually start that tracing process. Then we work with local waste handling partners who receive the waste. They give a quality report of the waste that they receive from the factories, and they also do sort of services that are required by the recyclers. So that is the baling, the cleaning of paper and paper from the cutting room table and things like that, and aggregating enough volumes to then send forward to the recyclers. And all of this movement of waste that's registered in the platform actually then is shared in aggregated ways to the brand or to different programs or to different stakeholders involved in these circular value chains. But I talked a little bit about the motivations, and I think that's really key. Like, why is it important to do this? For the factory, the key motivation is as Alexander described already. Also, we're developing the platform to be more aligned with HIG because we're collecting a lot of really useful data for HIG reporting. The benefits for the waste handlers are massive because they actually receive this pre-segregated clean textile waste. And this makes their life so much easier to then have less process loss and provide higher quality, lower rates of contamination waste to the recycler. And this is a key point. We talk about traceability in terms of policy, in terms of the benefit of the brand and the system, but really it's because of the traceability and the quality of the feedstock for recyclers is paramount. And with the trying to make higher quality, whether it's mechanical recycled products, the better the quality of the waste, the cleaner it is, the better quality that recycled fiber is at the other end. It's really key for us to understand that. And also as well, the requirements of the chemical recyclers that are entering the market, they also need to have quite specific data. Even if they can accept a blended textile of polycotton, they often need to know exactly what percentage is that polycotton. Is it 80-20? Is it 60-40? Is it 70-30? And they need to really know that there is really no elastane in, or maybe they can accept elastane, but it's a very small amount. So this is why this traceability is in a very practical sense, incredibly important. The current challenges in Bangladesh today is, as with any country and any industry, the waste handling sector often waste flows through informal channels, and Camille talked about this earlier on as well. And it's no exception in Bangladesh and in the textile industry in the country. At the moment, in a trading network, there is very little motivation to give the traceability. You don't, if you're trading the waste in a traditional way, you're buying as cheap as possible and you're selling as expensive as possible. That's what most businesses are set up to, how they're set up to work. So there's nothing wrong with that. But of course, you're not then motivated to tell people, hey, I've brought the waste from here, or I've sold your waste there, for fear of being cut out of this supply chain. So how can we actually formalize this and provide a good business case moving forward? Well, this is where it becomes really interesting, because actually the waste handler can transition to becoming from a trader to almost like a service provider, offering services to the recycler and being that sort of really important glue for the industry itself. And we've now worked with several waste handlers working in this traceable, more sort of service provider context, where they're still buying the waste and selling the waste, but it's fully traceable, and they're motivated to provide the information on how much waste they've generated and where it has gone to, because then they become a visible part of this supply chain. They're visible to the manufacturer, they're visible to the brand, and critically, they're visible to the recycler as well. So the key challenge is this formalization of the waste handling sector, moving from these trading networks and into a different way of working, and understanding the industry themselves, understanding the huge potential and business opportunities that there are to make this transition. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Lynn, for that very clear lay of the land, really, and also for talking about the motivations. I feel it's a part of what Alexander also touched upon, but actually the motivation for currently informal traders to become more formalized. I guess that's what needs to become more clearer, what that could be and how they can benefit from this process as well. Super. So then I'd like to introduce Rael from the H&M and also understand how you are working with your Bangladeshi suppliers towards circular economy and really using the innovation and traceability in textile industries as well.
Yep. Thank you, Holly. I'm glad to be part of this very exciting and timely discussion. And I believe this is the high time to act on circularity that we all talking about now. So let me throw some light on how H&M Group is working globally and as well as in Bangladesh. So at H&M Group, we are currently working towards bringing the waste that we are generating in our supply chain back into our product. And for that, we are actively building a recycling ecosystem for efficient waste management and a recycling network across production markets like Bangladesh to bring back those recycled textile waste as a feedstock for our product that we are manufacturing. So we started our waste management activity in Bangladesh in 2019, as Alexander also mentioned about BESTSELLER's waste management activity. But we started that at 2019, then we scaled it up to in different other production market. Till 2022, we have onboarded more than 80 of our suppliers from different production market into waste management network, where we reported so far more than 8,000 tons of waste, on which we have approximately recycled around 1,500 tons of waste into our recycling network globally. And for all this waste that we are talking about, we are using a reverse resource platform to keep track of our waste that we are generating and where we are sending those things. Globally, mechanical recycling of cotton is available for scale, but recycling technologies for blended textile waste and other materials are still emerging, which has the share of almost 50% or even in some cases more. And their innovation will play a very vital role. We have some technologies in the western part of the world, but those are not in the maybe in lab scale or pilot scale. And even in some cases, those are not solving the whole issues that we are talking about in terms of blended waste recycling. Sorry, to address that in Bangladesh, we are collaborating with this UNIDO project in their Switch to Circle Economy value chain projects. And in this project, we aim to build the indigenous capacity and capability of our local supply chain here in Bangladesh through surfacing, testing, piloting, and scaling the adoptions of collection, sorting, and recycling solutions for cotton and polyester blended waste. In this project, we are working in two work streams mostly, where in the first work stream, we are aiming to establish an integrated sorting and recycling system for blended textile waste, where in the second one, we are focusing mostly on building an ethical and traceable PET waste collection and recycling supply chain. For both the work streams, we had to go through an open innovation challenge and bidding process to find out best available technology or innovators there. And I'm very glad to share with you that we have got two such innovative and emerging companies with us. One for workstream one for blended waste recycling, we have got CIRC SARC from USA, who has the groundbreaking technology, I would say, for their cotton poly blended waste separation, recycling, and converting that into lyocell and polyester. And for the second work stream, we have got GarbageMan, who has the solution of collecting PET waste in a traceable way. They have some traceability solutions for that. And definitely, as I said, we are using RR platform, reverse resource platform for textile waste traceability, and we would be using GarbageMan, their own platform for the traceability solutions of PET bottle collections, from where and from which people we are collecting those PET bottles. And definitely, our goal is to follow the waste value hierarchy of reduce, reuse, and recycle for sure to get maximum value out of it. And at H&M Group, our long-term goal, maybe many of you know that we want to be net zero by 2040. And our material goal is to convert 30% of our material from recycled sources by 2025. And within 2030, we want to convert all of our material into either recycled or maybe in sustainable source. At H&M Group, we are very committed to meeting our climate and circularity goal. Recycling of products and materials will be the key for this for sure, both in terms of ability to source the recycled materials and assess us to manage or reuse our pre-consumer textile waste that we are generating into our supply chain partners. However, we also acknowledge that the recycling sectors are in our primary production markets like Bangladesh are still emerging, and we have long way to go for the entire textile industry. And we recognize the need of changes at a system level, and maybe innovation and traceability is definitely the one we should talk about. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Real. And there's actually a question that ties into just what you were talking about. So I'd like to ask it straight away. And that's if you have any post-consumer textile recycling plans in Bangladesh. How does this perhaps fit into, of course, we're talking about post-industrial, but yeah, what is your thinking on post-consumer?
So for post-consumer textile waste, maybe some of us, we already know that we can't import any post-consumer textile waste in Bangladesh, and we don't have stores or collection mechanism here in Bangladesh. So we don't have any plan as of now, but if definitely government allows to import post-consumer textile waste, and if we wanted to be complied with the EU regulations that we are talking about, this could be an internal important factor in future for sure.
Interesting, thank you. And of course, I think one end we see a lot of post-consumer garments going from the West to different regions in Africa and really disrupting, or even to Chile, the local ecosystem. So it's like, how do we then make sure that if that's possible, that the recycling and sorting infrastructures that are really scaled within a country like Bangladesh to deal with that. But a lot of opportunity, and really exciting to hear innovators like Circ are working with you in Bangladesh. So thank you for sharing. I am aware we're having a few technical difficulties because I wanted to hand over to Somatish at Intellecap, but I'm not sure, is your sound already working, Somatish, or unfortunately not?
I think his sound is not working, so I was chatting with him.
So I'm very sorry for this. While we try and find a resolution, then I'll go on to our next panelist. If she's available. Vidya at BGMEA, I was curious to ask you if you could reflect on how Bangladesh textile and RMG industries could be supported for business growth by enabling policies on traceability that we've been talking about, and perhaps more specifically into the import example we gave. But are you here?
Thank you, Holly.
Okay.
I am here.
I can't see you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you. Can everyone else see Vidya?
Okay. Nim can see me. Nim, can you see me?
No.
No? Okay. Should I just speak anyways?
Yes.
And as long as you guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Bangladesh, of course, your question is how Bangladesh RMG sector could be supported for business growth by enabling policies on traceability. I'd like to start by saying that, Bangladesh is already at an advantage of having an established system of managing the pre-consumer waste. As we know, our industry is almost about 47 years old. And I'd like to imagine that ever since Bangladesh gave birth to its RMG industry, the wastage was being handled right from the beginning in a particular way. However, the issue lies in the fact that our entire system of managing the pre-consumer waste is informal. And with projects like the UNIDO Switch to CE project, we are already working towards changing the dynamics from being informal to formal. What we need to do here in Bangladesh is to bring about policy changes that encourage people to be more traceable. It's not like they don't want to be a part of the whole supply chain. It's just that they're not aware of it, or they don't. It's like a them and us situation. I believe in Italy, the situation was same when the pre-consumer waste was being managed by their mafia, but then again, it was a system. In Bangladesh, we don't have a mafia, but what we have are localized people who have been managing the waste and earning their living from exactly this industry. Now, from data that we have, 60% of the waste that is collected from the RMG factories in Bangladesh are exported out of Bangladesh for a very high value. The whole recycling technology and process was not available in Bangladesh until very recently. As you know, that Recover has set up plant in Bangladesh where they do the mechanical recycling, and now more and more garments factories are adapting the technology from companies in India and China, and they're replicating it, and they are beginning to process and bale their own waste. What we need in Bangladesh is a regulatory framework. And this regulatory framework needs to be set up by the government. They need to establish a comprehensive regulatory framework that mandates traceability standards across the textile and RMG industries in Bangladesh. These standards should outline requirements for tracking products from raw material sourcing to the final consumer, ensuring transparency and accountability at every stage, and also by defining the boundaries of the way in which this wastage is managed. We need government incentives that can provide incentives to encourage companies to invest in traceability technologies and practices. We can include tax breaks, subsidies, or grants for implementing traceability systems, training employees, and upgrading infrastructure. We for sure need incentive that comes from various sectors. One would be the brands or the foreign partners with whom we work, who should ideally give us some higher price for being traceable and having a clean supply chain, or being able to show transparency in the supply chain. From governments, both in Bangladesh and perhaps, for example, the EU, we would like incentives. As you know, Bangladesh is graduating from a middle-income country into becoming a middle-income country, and therefore we will automatically lose some of the benefits that we get for exporting our garments abroad. However, what we would like is that, for example, if we are exporting to the EU, a garment that is more recyclable, more traceable, and that proper supply chain can be, transparent supply chain can be proven, I believe that we should be incentivized. Of course, the question of the due diligence directive that is coming about from Europe is a big factor, which will make it mandatory for us to be transparent and traceable. And as you know, the BGMEA is already working with the GIZ to create a database from which we will be able to collect all the data in relation to wastage and traceability from various garments factories. The policies that the government will come up with also needs to encourage technology transfer and foreign direct investment, so that more companies who promote traceability, whether it is a simple spray that will make your garment more traceable and go back to the DNA of the garment itself, all of these things should be promoted by our government. Renewable energy, of course, is an issue. And as you know, Holly, very recently in COP27, it was the GFA that announced that Bangladesh will, for the first time, set up its wind energy plant in the Bay of Bengal. So far, we are fully dependent on solar energy, but I don't think solar energy is enough for handling all the pre-consumer waste and recycling that is produced out of Bangladesh. I just wanted to say one thing, post-consumer garments. It was very interesting, but it was just yesterday that I learned that apparently before the garment sector was set up in Bangladesh, post-consumer second-hand garments was allowed to be imported into this country because we did not produce our own garments. And hence it was allowed. And I think right now, the BGMEA, other stakeholders, the Ministry of Commerce, and even this project itself, the Switch to Circular project, can campaign, if necessary, with the government by showing a good cause and purpose of post-consumer waste and how we could make it recyclable, to include that again in the conversations. I think I will leave it to that, and thank you very much. I'll try to figure out what happened to my camera. Thank you.
Well, I think what we always say within the GFA, that if you have brilliant content and amazing speakers, usually the tech and the production will let you down. So I think that's the case during this call. But I appreciate that very much, and a bit interesting to also learn more about the potential framework you're working on with GIZ. And it is indeed there's so many things that you can actually include when you're talking about circularity, of course, because if we have the likes of Circ maybe being interested in establishing a facility in Bangladesh, they will need renewable energy for their facilities. So
they even came and visited, I think, exactly. A couple of months ago.
Yeah. But there's lots of things, lots of components that can be brought into that. But good to hear that you do see opportunities for the different actors working in Bangladesh, and that there's a benefit for the RMG sector. Absolutely. So we are at the hour and we have another 30 minutes to go. So we do have a few other questions that I'd like to share with our different panelists. And I also see a few questions coming in on the chat, which is brilliant. Please keep them coming. But I'd like to hand over again to Patrick. And first, you helped us understand a little bit what the current situation is around traceability. Could you share now a little bit more about the key regulatory measures or standards that you see in the EU that are being prepared on this topic, and how they can perhaps implicate a global value chain such as Bangladesh?
Yeah, thanks, Holly. And for this, I prepared a slide because it's easier to talk about this having this in front of you, as there are quite a few policies for circularity and due diligence and related obviously to traceability. As I said at the beginning, many of these are still new or still under preparation, and the first one to mention is the CSDDD, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and this one was approved in 2022, but the timeline for adoption is still unclear. So once this comes through, the objective for this is that due diligence needs to be integrated into organizational policies and management of companies, and that's not only for textile sector, but that's across different industries. Also to mention is the CSRD, the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and this will start next year in 2025 for large companies. Smaller ones, SMEs, will start in 2027. So there's a phased approach. Just given, I think, also the capacity of companies to engage with these new reporting standards. So it's the ESIS which need to be adopted and applied, and this for disclosure of non-financial information, which also includes sustainability aspects. So then an important one for circularity is the digital product passport. Here again, the timelines are not clear, but what's happening this year is that there will be a battery passport that will be implemented. So looking at especially for the EV sector and others. So, and this is very much about standardizing definitions, but also the data protocols for various types of products, which are needed to ensure the traceability. Then already mentioned the American legislation on forced labor, and especially targeted at Uyghurs and Xinjiang. So the EU is currently working on a similar forced labor regulation. This still needs to be adopted by the Council. And yeah, the objective is quite clear here. So banning products that are made with forced labor, and that would apply domestically and also to imported products. And interestingly, this is probably going to apply also to not only to textiles that have cotton coming from Xinjiang, but also other products like solar panels, where silicon comes from that region. Then there's two domestic laws. France's anti-waste law for circular economy, that's already in place since 2023. There are going to be some updates. Objective is a bit broader than just traceability, but sort of the aim is to reduce waste, traceability, and supply chain information. It also links to EPR. So all of these different elements coming together. And then also Germany's Supply Chain Act, the Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz, which is similar to the planned due diligence directive, and that's in force already since 2023, requiring German companies to become accountable for human rights violations and environmental impacts. And so that's I think, yeah, the main policies on the EU level, but obviously they also have implications internationally, also for trade, including for trade with Bangladesh. And that's why we also in this project, we're trying to coordinate how policies can be aligned. Also what, as Vidya mentioned, what policy framework in Bangladesh might be suitable and required, so that we don't create trade frictions, but enable good and traceable trade in circular garments and textiles in the future.
Thank you, Patrick. It's incredibly comprehensive, and I can imagine for a brand or a manufacturer for that part, trying to navigate these different policies at different levels is quite challenging. So maybe we can hand over to one of the brands here to reflect on how they're aiming to work around these policies, or how they can potentially support or impact the supply chains you're working with. Rial, would you like to take a pass at that?
Yeah, sure. Even I can take over after Patrick even. And thank you, Patrick, for briefly describing about the EU legislations. And while we are talking about all this emerging EU legislation, it will require EU-bound products to include recycled content in future. The regulations, as Patrick also mentioned, in many cases we don't have the timeline, but this is under development, and we know that it would be expected to enter into force for us within the next couple of years, and likely to mandate the use of textile recycled content into the garments. To be able to comply with it, we would be required to recycle post-industrial textile waste with traceability in production countries like Bangladesh. So I want to give you a bit of idea on the overall Bangladesh market of pre-consumer textile or post-industrial textile waste. Bangladesh generates the largest amount of post-industrial textile waste in the world, and it is estimated that 100% of cotton waste in Bangladesh is worth over 100 million USD in the recycling market. And if we can recycle that 100% cotton waste in Bangladesh, we could potentially save 500 million USD in terms of import of textile raw material or fiber in Bangladesh. So you can imagine how big is this recycling sector domestically in Bangladesh. So in current practices, what's happening? High quality of pre-consumer textile waste are flowing through informal waste handling network, which Ms. Vidya has also mentioned over there, where feedstock availability and contamination levels are very hard to control. So if it goes on those informal sector, which Neen, you also mentioned in your time. At the same time, traceability of the textile waste, that will also be very difficult to maintain or to achieve. So to be able to meet EU regulation, textile recycling in Bangladesh requires to grow at scale. The textile recycling sector in Bangladesh is still growing, but that can go a long way. And we recognize the need of policy and regulatory changes to support and fully capture the value of the pre-consumer textile waste that we are talking about, especially the cotton one. And there we see two areas where we should prioritize ourselves from our side. The first one, definitely formalizing the informal waste value chain by creating an appealing business case for the parties whoever involved over there, collector, sorter, trader, or whoever they are, maybe the local influential peoples as well. We may need to involve them, aid them in shifting from an informal sector to more formal sector. Then creating an investment climate for the local and maybe foreign investor in high value recycled yarn production. So currently in Bangladesh, they are managing mostly mechanical recycling of cotton. But if we have the technology like SARC or those kind of technologies, if they wanted to come and set up a facility here in Bangladesh, so we may need to have, or we may need to ready the total recycling ecosystem. So if they are here, what could be their output and how would be able to use the the output of those things from Bangladesh market. So maybe that whole ecosystem with investment promotions, incentives, and simplification of all this administrative process could be very, very important to further go on. In Bangladesh, maybe we have enough capacity or good capacity for mechanical recycling of cotton waste, but we are generating huge amount of blended waste, and there maybe this could be very, very important. Yeah. I want to stop here if there is no question.
Thank you, Brielle. Yeah, okay. I think the role of policy in shaping that whole ecosystem is very clear as well. And Alexander, over to you. Could you explain how you see these potential policies and how they impact your supply chain?
Yeah, can you hear me? Because it seems to be a little bit of a glitch on my side. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. No, I will just echo a little bit of what Brielle already touched upon, because of course the reality for bestseller is very much the same. And I think if we look at all of these policies that are being raised in the EU on EU level, transparency and traceability is really the key thing here, and it's a burning platform for us. And especially, yeah, we need to lower our impact as a business as well, and then it really comes down to increasing the usage of recycled material in our garments. And we know that the lower hanging fruit is of course the post-industrial waste. And then specifically looking at Bangladesh, we just know that the current system there is informal, as we already touched upon here on this panel, and it can be really difficult for us to interact with those stakeholders in the informal sector. So that's why we also need policies on a national level in Bangladesh to support this, to really drive the change locally as well. Yeah, thank you, Holly.
Alexander. And I think we are drawing like pretty similar conclusions across the different panelists on what really needs to happen. So that's very helpful. I wanted to loop in Vidya again, if you are still here. And perhaps first actually to point everyone to the chat, because we're terribly sorry, but Somatish from Intellecap is unable to mute himself, hence has typed his intervention into the chat as well. So he's just explaining how Intellecap are operating within the Switch to Circular Economy program, and how they're working with the H&M group on recycling of PET bottles. So please take a look at that chat. And then with that, I would then think about introducing, reintroducing Vidya, if you can still hear us. I just wanted to ask how well prepared you feel Bangladesh is for these growing traceability requirements.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So basically, the thing is, as you know, that, really for the last 2 years, with the introduction of the Switch to Circular project and the partnership projects that we've had before, post-COVID, now there is a lot of attention on traceability, on circularity, recycling, and the rest of it. This attention was not there to begin with. And now that the part of the project that we are all within, working with Bestseller, we're working with reverse resources, we're working with circular economy, there is a lot of knowledge that is now out there in the market. BGMEA has had, as you know, last year on September the 2nd, which was going to be a one-day project, but we ended up having an entire week-long of events simply on circularity and traceability, and hence the knowledge is out there in the market. And with the knowledge comes the idea of the business cases, the additional income that could be generated from what is we are practically just throwing away, like it's been said before. Research has also shown that potentially it could be a $5 billion industry, this entire wastage industry that we are looking into. So how ready is Bangladesh? I think Bangladesh is getting ready. I think that awareness is there. I think with all the partners who are in the Switch to Circular project, we are learning more and more every day. I think at the same time, the BGMEA has placed multiple policy regulation changes that we want to be implemented in this industry. I think within the BGMEA, we are now actually doing on-the-ground research in raising awareness about the effects of traceability. And automatically, like I said, the due diligence acts as almost policing factor to bring about traceability and how exports should take place in the future into Europe and also other countries. From the BGMEA, there is not only this project, we are also working together with H&M on increasing transparency and traceability and recycling and zero carbon discharge, etc., etc. We have partnerships with Circle Economy, who is going to do an upskilling learning process of circularity and traceability requirements for the global apparel market. And in this way, we're also working closely with the Ministry of Commerce, and we have multiple partners with whom we are engaging to further improve the requirements, the traceability requirements that are needed in Bangladesh. So
thank you.
It's of course a journey, and I think we are not right at the beginning of the journey. And I don't think we are too far behind in a global context either. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Vidya. And I think I definitely agree that you're not in the just starting, but there's a huge amount of work happening. So brilliant to hear also the projects that BGMEA are working on. So I would like to hand over just to Nin from Reverse Resources and then to Camille from the Circular Economy Foundation. But with a request, if you could support with a short answer, because we are running a little bit tight on time. But we did really want to include these last two questions to you before we open up for audience interventions. So just to start with Nin, that's if you could share a little bit more about the tools and measures that you feel need to be put into practice and what different roles of stakeholders you would see in this transition.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing from everybody talking today is that waste is becoming or needs to be considered more like a strategic resource, a fiber rather than a waste in itself. And I think Rial and Alex Sander spoke very well on that sort of the business potential and Vidya of what that means for Bangladesh itself to recapture that textile waste domestically and to valorize that textile waste domestically. And we've also talked a lot about the need for the public sector and subsidies and incentives to also stimulate the start of these circular value chains. I think any change in an industry benefits greatly for adaptation by having those policy changes to get the ball starting. I've made a slide here quickly today to show you that Reverse Resources and alongside BGMEA and the work that we're doing as part of Switch and with other projects as well, we actually have collected a lot of data which can be incredibly useful for the public sector. Well, not just for the public sector, for many different stakeholders within the industry. So our ambition is to create a public dashboard where real-time data alongside analysis of sort of total volumes, estimations of total waste volumes are captured. So this can help the public sector, the ministries actually design and understand how to build these incentives or tax reductions or policy changes that we're all discussing, and also critically how to measure their impact if they are successful and how to adapt and change accordingly. It's also incredibly important for financial institutions to help doing the support and investments for organizations like CERC and attracting chemical recycling to the country. And also, lastly, incredibly useful for the sector itself, the associations such as BGMEA, to promote the good work that is happening in the country and to demonstrate the circularity that is actually happening and is growing at a good speed that we see. So that's it. It would be my succinct answer.
Thank you, Nin. I think having a public dashboard would be amazing, especially it's not only tracking real time what material flows are happening, but maybe also creating prognoses of, imagine if we would have recycling technology X based in this country, what would that mean for the capacity, for the value retainment and so forth. So yeah, I think that's an interesting call to support that initiative. And then over to you, Camille. So my last question was what kind of capacity building in Bangladesh you believe is needed to improve traceability? We heard from Vidya that it's a lot's already happening, but yeah, how do you feel that could be facilitated? And if you could keep it to 1 minute, that would be helpful.
Yes. I think most have already been said, but I think to improve traceability in the textile sector and for the transition towards circular economy to be just and fair, we really need all stakeholders in and around the supply chain to be involved. So the public, private, non-governmental and informal sectors to be involved in the development of infrastructure for traceability system, establishment of industry-wide standards and protocols, and the implementation of training programs, as you mentioned. And as part of the Switch to Circular Economy project, Circular Economy Foundation is contributing to this in 2 ways. First of all, through a training program focusing on manufacturers and suppliers, really in order to enhance their understanding of traceability concepts, including the importance of documenting material sourcing, production processes, and product movement. And this is really much based on the great work that Reverse Resources have been doing so far, who are key collaborator in this, and also all the Switch partners. So really here our role is really to help accelerate their efforts and amplify their impact wherever we can. And the second way is through our work on advancing insights on the employment measurement framework on decent work from a value chain perspective. Try to be very short.
Thanks so much. I think that's a topic, at least if I can add my selfish wish to this, would love to dive more into maybe in the next meeting, like understanding what are the social impacts, what's the employment potential, how do we create more resilience there? So brilliant to hear that's something incorporated within your work as well. Super. So we'd now like to see within a few minutes if we can address a few of the audience questions. And we actually have a special guest joining for an intervention, Olivia Chassot from UNICE, who will have a few minutes to reference the sustainability pledge. And I believe Olivia, hopefully, yeah, I can see you. Yes. Hopefully your sound works. Perfect. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Holly, and thank you very much, UNIDO, for convening this really insightful session. Thank you very much to all the panelists. So at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, we've done some work in the space of traceability. I just wanted to briefly share some of the next steps and call on collaboration on this. So the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe has launched a few years ago an initiative on transparency and traceability. This is funded by the European Commission, and this initiative engages already with hundreds of industry experts globally. And this support it supports companies to share product information in a standardized way on sustainability criteria, and also it helped them to formulate sustainability claims that are reliable. So it's a toolbox that has been adopted during an intergovernmental process. It was adopted by the member states in 2021, and so it's recommendations, guidelines, information exchange standards that support the sustainability through the value chain, so from the raw material processing to the final product in the garment and footwear sector only. And now it's also a project that has been implemented in the last year with the industry quite substantially. In 2023, we reached a milestone. We received more than 100 pledges from actors of the garment and footwear industry that pledged to support traceability and transparency with dedicated actions. And actually, Reverse Resources is one of them. So pleased to see on this panel. And these are actions from all over the world, around 28 countries involved. We've also engaged with the industry to track and trace product using blockchain technology. And so that enabled us to trace the origin of the raw materials. And we did that with about 19 use cases, clothing product from end-to-end traced in a UNICE blockchain platform across 23 countries. So again, it's a global process. And now we are in the process to develop engagement strategy to advance traceability and transparency in 20 priority countries for the sector. And I'd like to here call on interest to collaborate with us on this engagement strategy, especially with Bangladesh, that is also a priority country. And for us at UNICE, circular economy is a cross-cutting priority. So for us, it's clear that traceability is key to support circular economy, to support circular business models. And this was mentioned by our colleague from Chatham House at the beginning. Traceability can support life cycle data gathering, improve resource efficiency from the design to the life extension, end of life of the product or the life extension of textile product. So that's why we joined forces with our sister organization, UNIDO, to shed light on the issue of trade flows of secondhand clothing. And this is an issue that was mentioned by Mrs. Khan from the BGMEA. So our study had a focus on trade flows between Europe and Chile, and we just launched the executive summary of the study yesterday at a side event of the OECD Forum. And there are recommendations to improve the sustainability of used clothing worldwide, saying that these recommendations can apply beyond just Chile. So lastly, I just want to have a few concluding points on the collaboration opportunities. I'd like to call on stakeholders' interest to collaborate with us, especially to join the sustainability pledge community that I've mentioned, and that is quite important place to share best practices on traceability and transparency, and to engage on the development of engagement strategy, as mentioned before. I'd like to invite also UNIDO Switch to Circular project to build synergies with UNICE, building on the traceability toolbox that is already existing, and like to call on industry actors from Bangladesh to collaborate with us. And we are about to launch another project with UNEP and the Global Environment Facility to apply the traceability toolbox in order to reduce the use and release of chemicals of concern, such as persistent organic pollutants, the POPs, in textiles. So again, here I see a great opportunity for collaboration. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to contribute, and thank you very much for this insightful panel.
Thank you very much, Olivia. And if I may invite you perhaps to share some links so that we can learn more about the different initiatives in the chat, or perhaps we can include them in the after meeting report. I think that would be brilliant. But thank you so much for your intervention. So we have 4 minutes left, but I have a commitment to answer at least one of the questions that have been posted in the chat. So I was just scrolling through and I saw one topic came up twice, and that was GRS RCS certification. So one guest asked how affected recycled standards are in Bangladesh in terms of traceability and ensuring compliance at waste recyclers. And then another participant talked about the forecast and the increasing demand for recycled materials, and that GRS RCS could help verify or incentivize. However, the chain of custody under those certifications starts at the recycler, not at the origins of textile waste. So, question to our panelists: how effective do you feel GRS RCS are, and does it encompass the whole value chain, or how should we be perhaps advising them to incorporate that? I'm leaning towards asking this question to Nin, but open to anyone who would like to chime in. I see you smiling, so go ahead.
Yes, you're correct, James. There is no chain of custody before the recyclers, but we are working on a project now with Textile Exchange, who owns the GRS certification, and Fashion for Good, on a project on this exact topic. So what additional information needs to be included in the Reclaimed Material Declaration form that basically is the first point of this chain of custody, and how can we support to add more traceability and provide that to the recyclers themselves. And critically, this needs to be assessed in a way that promotes more traceability, whilst at the same time not stopping or causing a hindrance to scaling the recycling industry and, scaling the volume of recycled fibers. So something that's adaptable. So we're putting together a round of suggestions to Textile Exchange, who will then send them back to their steering committee to then decide upon how these improvements could be implemented. So we do expect it's not going to be overnight, but there is conversations going on around this topic and how to improve GRS further. I believe that GRS is a great certification. I think it's quite unique as well that there's only really one leading certification on this topic. We did some years ago have within the cotton sector, there's so many certification and everybody got sort of slight fatigue. So we at Reverse Resources are quite a big fan of something a bit more standardized so that it can be easily understood by the end consumers as well. It's not perfect, there still needs to be improvements, but I believe that has a great value for the industry itself.
Great. Thanks so much, Nin. And any other panelists, if you'd like to add to that, please do so in the chat, because I will start with the roundup. And of course, first, send a huge thanks to our panelists and to our introduction speakers for contributing today, also to the organisers for having me as a moderator, which is a great pleasure. I know there were a few questions in the chat about how to engage or to learn more about these initiatives. So I see there's email addresses that have been shared in the chat as well, and we'll pull up a screen here where you can find more information about the Switch to Circular Economy Value Chains initiative. To summarise high level some of the learnings that we were discussing, of course, traceability and how having a chain of custody is really critical, not only for brands trying to meet new legislative requirements or manufacturers, but also for textile recyclers who are really a new actor in our value chain and need to know the characteristics of the feedstock to have the highest possible recycled material output. Which is, of course, increasingly critical for brands with their recycled material targets. And that origin and the journey of that is something that traceability can deliver. We also touched upon the importance of upstream circularity and really looking at increasing domestic recycling capacity in manufacturing regions around the world, and potentially also looking forward at what the social impacts can be on that, and then how pragmatic textile waste segregation and digitization from a manufacturing facility with different actors and hopefully formalized waste handlers will help form and deliver on this. Maybe lastly, just to share that this is another action on a manufacturer's to-do list. We need to be very realistic about the realities that they're facing and economic uncertainty, of course, all around. And with that, the business model for all actors and the value share of these efforts is really imperative. So hopefully collective action programs like the Switch to Circular Economy initiative are supporting this across the industry, and also pulling on levers like policy to do so. I hope that was a reasonable recap of what we were discussing today, and send huge thanks again to everyone that was involved and all the people listening in from around the world. Please do check out the switchtocircular.eu website to learn more, and have a great rest of the OECD Forum and a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.